Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Tell Me Why Chapter 3. And this is the final part of this series. Okay, so just like my Chapter 2 review, I'm going to tell you now there's probably going to be spoilers for Chapter 1 and or 2. So if you haven't seen my videos on those, you haven't played those two chapters, there will probably be spoilers here. I'll put a card in the video for either or both of them, as well as include the links in the description down below. But let's get into this, and it starts off a little rough because at the end of Chapter 3, Tyler and Allison get into a pretty heated argument. I mean, I guess it's not that bad, but it is very emotional for both of them. And it kind of brings to light something that had been nagging at me throughout the game, and that is Tyler is very self-absorbed throughout a lot of this. So that is kind of rough, especially since you've been following these two throughout this adventure, and it's just kind of hard to see that. But I will say that separation really makes the first hour or so of Chapter 3 awesome, because you get to learn more about Allison finally, and you get to learn what she's been going through ever since all of the events, ever since Tyler was taken away, all of that. Chapter 3 also sheds a lot of light on Marianne as a character, well beyond what you thought you knew, and I really like that. I think it's fully worth experiencing that. But the big question is, who is the twins' father? And I will say, I didn't see it coming! So I think that is a really good thing, but I think that this chapter does the best job of really exploring Allison's character, because we've really gotten to see a lot more of Tyler. And I think that this story wraps up really nicely. It made me really happy the way that they did it. There were a couple of times where I wasn't sure where the story was going or how it was going to end, but I think they give you a good insight to the main characters, to Marianne. You get to know a bit about some of the secondary characters a bit more this time around, and I really enjoyed that. As for the rest of it, let's just go through the basics. The audio is still really good. Once again, I didn't notice any lines where I was like, ooh, that could have been delivered better, so that's always a good thing. For the game overall, I will say I really enjoyed the music in this game. I think they did a good job. I think the sound effects are really good. I think this is probably one of Don't Nod's best when it comes to sound effects. Then let's move into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot. They introduced a couple of new things, and neither one of them are really game-changing. They don't really do anything game-changing in this. I will say that one of the unique things about Tell Me Why versus previous Don't Nod games is it's far less epic, I would say. The superpowers are less impressive, but they are still there. But I mean, the core is there, what you're used to, your decisions having a weight, making a difference. It's all still there. I will say it doesn't feel as impactful as it has in previous games, which I hate to draw that comparison, but it's true. Not that it's necessarily a negative, because I do think the story still goes very well, and I'm sure that if I were to play it in a very different manner, I would get different results, which is the core element of these games. Next up, the controls. Nothing to address in Chapter 3. It's the exact same as what you've experienced in Chapter 1 if you've played Chapter 1. Hell, if you've played most of these interactive narrative style games, then you know what these controls are going to be like. Lastly, the visuals. No big difference here. I really do love, however, how they really start going into the book that the kids have written and applying it, and you begin to see how it really ties into Marianne's character. And I think those visuals really matter. I think it's very important in this case. Generally, I don't deem visuals as one of the most important elements, but in this case, I think the artistic stylings and I think what they show with their art is really important. And how they use this kid's book and that artwork to tie into the lives, I think that's very important to the story. And it didn't necessarily feel as important early on as it does in this chapter specifically. So to wrap this up, I'm gonna say Tell Me Why is really good. I really enjoyed it. I will admit it wasn't as bombastic and as action-packed as some of their other ventures, but I do think it was a really good story at the end of the day. And I think they do a good job tackling a lot of the issues that they're tackling, and they try to tackle quite a few. There were a couple of small things that I wish they would have delved into a little deeper, not necessarily from a, like, these are important topics to cover aspect, but from a things popped up in the story that were just vaguely interesting, a little more than vaguely interesting, and they didn't really go anywhere. But I won't say they ever really took away from the story or downgraded the story when they didn't go into those elements. So I'm going to say I fully recommended this game as a whole. I really enjoyed it. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, what is your favorite Don't Nod game? Not that they have a super deep library, but they have more games than you might think. As always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, and if you like what I'm doing in general, share, subscribe. Have a good one.